Welcome to BreaknBible with the Tully Adventurers. Explore! It's a good day for some good news. In this world, you will have trouble. But take heart, I've overcome the world. That's Jesus' good news to us in John 16:33.
As we face this new day and all it has for us, we find courage and hope in the only trustworthy words available. Tully Adventurers, explore.
The Bible.
We are in the year of grace. We have decided that grace is going to be our theme as we go through 2022, and we are going to be learning how to be more graceful, more gracious, more grateful, which will probably allow more grace. And instead of being embarrassed by our mistakes, we're going to consider the possibility that when things go wrong, it's a learning experience because we don't know everything. And the theme that I've been using is you don't want me to do surgery on you because I'm not a surgeon. I don't know how to do surgery. So we allow the people who have authority and who have worked hard to learn a skill to be the people who we trust to do certain things. I want a surgeon to do my surgery. I want a comedian to entertain me. And I want a teacher, someone who's learned how to do the job of teaching, to be the one who teaches me. I want people who are interested in a subject to help me learn about it. On our Instagram page, I've been putting up these pictures of these different plants and I don't know what they are. And I put out there, hey, what is this plant? And I had someone send me, hey, just use this app. If I wanted to use an app, I would find an app to use it. I'm looking for people who are interested in this because they're going to know things about it and have an intensity and an enjoyment in telling me about what it is. And so the grace that I'm looking for is the grace to find people who have authority, who know what they're talking about, who are interested in the subject. It's too dry and boring to try to just read everything, especially things that I'm not interested in, off of the internet. I don't want to just GTS, as my wife says. I want to create a relationship. And realistically, I also want to know if there are people who just don't know. If they don't know, that tells me something about them and helps me to be in relationship with them. If you're not interested in plants, that's totally fine. I don't know the name of plants. And so we actually hold that in common and can build relationship off it. So sometimes I'm not looking for the information itself. I'm looking for information about you as a human being so that I can relate to you better. Wild thought, I know. So we are in the Message version of the Bible, and we are going to be going to some different verses about grace. Jen's going to read hopefully the address first, and then the verse, and then I'm going to explain a little bit about where that verse is in the Bible, what the context is for the verse, so that we're not just pulling it out of context and using it however we want. While I'm explaining some of that information, Jen's going to be taking some notes about what the verse means to her and how it affects her. Then I'm going to let her speak about it, and then I'm going to speak about how it affects me. So just wanted to let you know that's kind of how we're going to be doing things, and hope you enjoy this and can follow along. We're grateful to have you here. So Jennifer, go ahead and start us with the first verse for today. What's the address?
The address is James 4:6. You're cheating on God. If all you want is your own way, flirting with the world every chance you get, you end up enemies of God and His way. And do you suppose God doesn't care? The proverb has it that He's a fiercely jealous lover, and what He gives in love is far better than anything else you'll find. It's common knowledge that God goes against the willful proud. God gives grace to the willing humble.
So James was the brother of Jesus. Go ahead and let that sink in for a minute. Jesus was not an only child. He had brothers and sisters. So once again, part of our understanding about who Jesus is God who is in the flesh. He's a human being. He's dealing with all the pains and struggles and strifes of a normal human being. So he grows up with brothers and sisters and has to deal with them. And then he's out there teaching and leading a group of people around the countryside, and his family doesn't like it sometimes and tells him he's doing the wrong thing. He's betrayed by his friends. All of these things happen. And so James is the brother of Jesus, and he's become a follower of Jesus. Can you imagine being a little brother to Jesus and then deciding that you actually do believe that he is who he says he is? That would be a trip. And so in this book of James, James is one of the, I believe, main three. So it's James, John, and Peter, and they're going to be the leaders of the church for the Jewish people, the Christian church for the Jewish people. And James is, as a pastor, trying to explain to people, this is how we live in right relationship with God. This is what it looks like. And so there's a lot of terminology that is relationship driven. As you can see here, you're cheating on God, you're flirting with the world, you're missing out on having right relationship with God. And of course this makes sense to the Jewish people of the time, because they have their entire history, which is God chooses them and then saves them, and then they decide that they want to worship other gods, and then bad things happen. The consequences of worshiping something other than God happens, and then they cry out to God and say, oh, please take us back, we're so sorry, and God saves them again. And then of course it's a cycle that just keeps repeating. God saves them, they worship him for a little while, they decide to worship other gods because they're tired of worshiping God, they have the consequences, which is normally getting taken over by some other country or group, and then they're brought back because God saves them again once they humble themselves and cry out to God. And so this verse would make perfect sense to the people who are reading it. It is exactly the entire history of human beings and God. All right, so now that we've considered all of that, Jennifer, what is the Holy Spirit speaking to you? What does this verse say to you? What does it mean for you?
There's a part that says, God goes against the willful proud.
Mm-hmm.
God gives grace to the willing humble. So it's the battle of willful and willing.
Yes. Yes.
And so willful proud. What came to mind was that thought of, I can do it all on my own.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I don't need anybody else. Almost flaunting, I don't need anybody else. I don't need help. I don't need a man. I don't need a woman.
I don't need my parents.
No, I can do this all by myself. Now, there are things I can do by myself. Absolutely. But when people are willing to help you, it's not just about helping you. It's about building relationship. When I'm allowed to help someone, I feel like I'm building a bridge. And then if I don't allow them to help me, I've just stopped the bridge halfway.
Yeah, absolutely. Why is this important for your personal life, or how has this happened in your own personal life?
Well,
Are you a helper, or are you a willing recipient of grace and help?
I'm a helper. I enjoy helping people. I feel closer to them that way. I feel awkward when they help me, like I'm doing something wrong.
Oh, okay.
Like I'm supposed to do it all on my own. And that's not true. There's a reason we have community. One of the reasons that we go to church is for that community.
Yes, absolutely.
It's not that that's the only place God is. It's that we need to develop relationships with other people, because other people are God's children too, not just us. And not just the ones that look like us and think like us and act like us. And so it definitely takes some humility to allow someone to help you, because it may shine a light on your own weaknesses. It may, let's just start there.
And that's what humility is. It's being of the earth. It's recognizing our own limitations. It's recognizing that we cannot do everything, and we're not going to be good at everything.
No.
There's no way that in one lifetime we're even going to experience everything that the world has to offer, let alone become capable in every single thing that is available to be able to do.
Right.
And we're not even interested in so many things.
No.
Absolutely. So I hear what you're saying, and I'm amused by this particular verse portion that you bring up, because so often we hear God opposes the proud, and we don't hear, but he gives grace to the willingly humble. The first thing that came to my mind was the idea of free will. Do we have free will? Well, of course we do. We, at the very least, get to choose if we're going to be proud or humble. And even if you don't believe in God, if you consider God as just the essence of being, of existing, then we know and can tell as we watch anything that happens in this world, people who are proud, people who are haughty, they tend to lose relationships. They tend to, even if they gain whatever they're pursuing, whether it's money or power or owning a lot of things or political power or whatever it is, they lose real human connection and relationship. And so it's interesting to me that, you know, the statement, I do what I want. Well, of course you do. And you get the consequences of doing what you want. If we're unhappy with our lives, all we have to do is look at what are we doing and what are the consequences of those things that we're doing. Most likely we're unhappy with our lives, we feel alone because we're not willing to let people help us. We're not willing to admit that we're wrong. We're not willing to connect with people. And there's so many reasons that happens in this world. There's plenty of excuses, you know. One of my inner vows growing up was, I will never get divorced. I saw what happened to my mom because she got divorced, and so I was never going to get divorced. And I had to be right about I'm never going to get divorced. Well, I can't control that. If I'm never going to get divorced, then I don't get to get married. If I don't get to get married, then I'm never going to have the connection with another human being whose entire promise to me is they're going to help me be the very best human being that I can be. And they're going to challenge me in places where I'm proud and haughty. And so one of the reasons I'm grateful that we're married, my love, is you challenge me in places where I'm prideful, or places where I'm so scared of allowing human connection that I'm feeling lonely and lost, but it's my own doing because I'm not willing to make those connections. And I'd like to point out right here, sometimes pride is called being scared.
I would say a lot of the time.
Tell me more.
Pride is being scared. Somebody who is boastful and I do this better than anyone else, 9 times out of 10, they're feeling insecure. And they need that recognition so to help them feel okay. You know, me doing things by myself is fear of being hurt, fear of being let down by people. You know, fear that if I don't ask anybody to help, then nobody can reject me.
Yep. Yes. Yes.
And so, you know, then I would just do it on my own. And even if it meant hurting myself, even if it meant, you know, causing myself great pain. And then to be sad afterwards that nobody helped me.
It's a heartbreaking cycle, and we all have gotten caught up in it at some point in our life. You know, it's that catch-22 of I'm not going to let anyone help, and now I'm upset that no one helped.
Yes.
And it's heartbreaking.
Right.
It's heartbreaking. Go ahead.
I was going to say, what came to mind is, I would have done it for them. How did they not know I needed that?
Right. And yet,
People
not
don't
asking
know.
for help means that no one knows what you need. So.
And for me, I would go on so long doing things for myself, people would assume I didn't need help.
Right.
That's what it looked like.
Right.
They didn't know.
So I want to come back to some of the words in this verse. I think they're great. If all you want is your own way, you end up enemies of God. Ooh! An enemy of the essence of being, an enemy of life itself. Man, that's a heartbreaking place to be. The proverb has it that he's a fiercely jealous lover, and what he gives in love is far better than anything else you'll find. That's the heartbreaking part for me, because all the time what we as human beings are doing is searching for that thing that's better than anything else that we're going to find. We think we're going after good things. Money is a good thing. Power is a good thing. Self-control is also a good thing. Gentleness is a good thing. Gentleness and self-control go hand in hand, because gentleness is control, self-control over my power, what I am capable of. What God gives in love is far better than anything else you'll find. What does God give? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, and self-control. And if we had those things, if we lived in those things every moment, not I get to talk just because I feel like talking, or I get to do the thing that I want to do just because I feel like doing it, but having enough self-control to consider how these things affect other people, we might actually be able to have a relationship. But once again, we want our own way, flirting with the world every chance you get. Oh. And it's so difficult because, once again, these are good things. Having a car is a good thing. Having a house is a good thing. Having a family is a good thing. Having a spouse is a good thing. Having children is a good thing. You might not get all of those in this life. You might get all of it. You might get more of it than you can handle. But God is going to give you these gifts, but as soon as we start worshiping them, my own capability, my ability to be a parent, my ability to take care of other people, my ability to, then we've lost. They're good things, but they're gifts from God. They're not my ability. Go ahead.
I think too, when you put the pursuit of those things ahead of hurting people.
I don't understand. Explain a little bit.
Like, let's say I really wanted to own a house.
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to own a house. Wanted a house, wanted to own a house. Now I could rent a house. I could afford that.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to own a house. So instead of taking care of my own children, I just ignore them for years on end and work just so I can have the house. And then I get the house, and then I don't want the kids to mess up the house.
Yeah. Right. So we're worshiping this. In this story, the person is worshiping owning a house. Mm-hmm. And because they're so focused, and we all get this way, just yesterday and for the past few days, our RV has not been working right. And we're full-time RVers. This is the only house we have. And it was very easy to fall into the trap of, these are all the problems with our house, and that's all that exists. We're in Key West right now. It's beautiful. It's sunny. The ocean is right outside our door. There are so many good things, good gifts that God has given. But instead of, what was great is at the end of those 3 days, we got to the point where we said, hey, we need to look up. We need to stop looking at all the problems of, our house not being everything we want it to be, and actually admit that God is good and has given us good things. We're in a beautiful place. We do have all of these other things that are available to us. So yes, when our focus is wrong, and that's what worship is, putting your focus on a given thing. And once again, it's gonna be a good thing. Mm-hmm. A house is a good thing. Mm-hmm. Children are a good thing. Mm-hmm. But a career is a good thing. But when it becomes the thing, that's when the problem happens.
Right.
When a new mother turns her heart away from her spouse towards her children, making her children more important than her relationship with her spouse, there's going to be problems in the relationship. When a new father turns his heart away from his spouse because now he's got to provide more, so he turns his heart towards his career so he can provide more and get more money for the family. The career is a good thing, but worshiping it, focusing so much on it that you miss out on your spouse, your children, all of those things, that's when it becomes a problem. Worshiping God keeps us balanced,
yes,
so that it's not career or family, which is usually a dichotomy in society. You pick one or the other. It's not a home, or it's not owning up a home versus renting a home. It's not any of these things. God is there in the center. He's never pulled in any one of these directions, but we as human beings are. And so when we turn back to the source, which is God, the essence of life, then we can get back into right relationship with all of the other things. That's really good, babe. You ready to move on to the next verse? Yeah. All right, let's check in with the next verse. Go ahead and read that address so we know where we're at.
This is Romans 5:8. Christ arrives right on time to make this happen. He didn't and doesn't wait for us to get ready. He presented himself for this sacrificial death when we were far too weak and rebellious to do anything to get ourselves ready. And even if we hadn't been so weak, we wouldn't have known what to do anyway. We can understand someone dying for a person worth dying for. And we can understand how someone good and noble could inspire us to self-sacrifice. But God put his love on and it stops.
Hey, and you can go check out that verse and see what the rest of it is. All right, let me give a little information. So this is, you went to Romans 5:8.
Did I skip something?
Yeah, it's okay though. Romans 5:8. So you skipped this one, which is fine. Romans 5:8. So the first 8 chapters of Romans, make sure you're writing your notes, babe. The first 8 chapters of Romans are all theology. Here's what it means to believe in Jesus, how it's going to affect your life, what it all is. And the rest of the book, the letter to the Romans, which was written by Paul, is explanation of here are the implications. So here's all this theology. Here's what it means. Here's what Christ has done for us. Here's what God has done through us through Jesus. And then the rest of the letter is now here's how you live because of these things that you believe. So Paul's writing a letter to Romans, the people in Rome. It would be a lot like living in America right now. You go to church, you're a Christian. Sometimes you think you're the only person who's a Christian in your entire town or city or whatever. And even when you go to church and see all these other people, sometimes it's difficult to think we're all really worshiping God and loving him because everyone's doing whatever they need to do. So that's kind of like what it would be like to have this letter written to a Roman person, a Roman Christian during this time. Jen, what does this verse speak to you? What stands out? What is the Holy Spirit speaking to you?
He doesn't wait for us to get ready.
Yep, I love it. Go ahead. Why is that? Why does that stand out to you?
I have come to know that, listen, my words here.
So he doesn't wait for you to get ready. What is that? Why is that standing out to you?
Well, one thing is that God is always here with me.
Mm-hmm.
I just have to turn to God.
Mm-hmm.
He's not waiting for the perfect time to come and be here for me.
Okay.
If I'm not close with God, it's because I'm not turning to Him.
Okay.
Not because He's not turned to me.
Why is that important to you today as we read this and we consider grace?
because every time I turn to God, He has grace for me. But some days it's so hard to have grace for other people.
If we don't receive grace, we can't give it. You know, we've talked a lot on this podcast and in our own conversations about disappointments we've had with people, particularly our parents, other people who we thought were going to help us out or care about us. And one of the things that we've acknowledged is no human being can give you what they don't have. So when we're not willing to receive help from others, we're trying to help people, but it's all on our own strength. When we're not receiving grace from God, we're trying to be graceful to other people, but we can't give it because we haven't allowed ourselves to receive it. And how do you receive grace? What do you have to do in order to receive grace?
In order to receive grace, you have to admit that what you did was wrong. You have to apologize, and you have to ask for forgiveness.
And that goes back to our other verse about you have to be humble.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to say, I'm wrong. What I did was wrong. I was holding on to being right, which made me wrong, even if I might have been right in the first place. Holding on to being right and beating it over people's heads, that's the wrong way to even have some moment of being right.
Because it might be the right message, but it's the wrong time. Maybe it's the wrong person. Maybe it's the wrong context.
Yeah. So when we are, I think what I'm hearing you say is when we're actually willing to admit that we're wrong, God can give us grace. And then when we see other people being wrong, we're not coming out of our own self-righteousness. We're coming out of God's grace to us.
Yes.
And you said He doesn't wait for us to be ready. So why is that? You said you're not always ready for what God's doing, or what is it?
It's that God is, I guess I'm just coming into knowing this myself, that God is always there. There's nothing He's waiting for. I'm the one holding it up.
That's really good. That's really good. And it's heartbreaking, but it's really good.
You know, so many times I've thought, I'm waiting for you to do something, God. But I'm the one holding it up.
Can you tell us what it is that you're doing normally that will hold God up?
Trying to be right. Because the message seems right.
Yeah. Good stuff, babe. Good stuff. So in this verse, Paul is specifically talking about salvation. And we've had a beautiful moment right here where the Holy Spirit has given some conviction, which is going to allow Jennifer to release being right a little faster. She's not going to be perfect at it. You know, one of the problems we have is we think Christians are going to be perfect, and that's not true. Christians aren't perfect. We're people who've received forgiveness. We're people who are forgiven, and because we're forgiven, we're more capable of forgiving. But once again, if you take the worst person at forgiving and they start learning how to forgive, you can't expect them to be the greatest forgiver ever. They're going to take baby steps. And so it's so weird to me that we judge Christians as on this scale of perfection instead of this scale of progress from wherever they started in moving towards God, in moving towards being like Christ. And that's what life is really about. So as we read this particular verse and set of verses, Christ arrives right on time to make this happen. He didn't and doesn't wait for us to get ready. He presented himself for this sacrificial death when we were far too weak and rebellious to do anything to get ourselves ready. It reminds me of these people who say, as soon as I'm good enough, then I'll go talk to God. As soon as I've done enough. The whole point of Christianity, the whole point of understanding who God really is to know there's nothing that we can do that's going to make us good enough, make us ready to be in relationship with God. And that's, once again, pride. I want there to be something I do that causes God to love me. But that's not how it works. God loves me, and so he's made a way for me to be in relationship with him, and I have to accept it. And that's exactly what you were talking about. We are still so caught up in being right, in helping others but not getting help, in being gracious to others, in being polite or kind to others, but it's all an act of pride. I'm not saying thank you to someone because I want to acknowledge that they've done a good job. In my heart, I'm saying thank you so that they know I'm a polite person. I know the right words to say to be kind to others. And it's all pride. And it's all garbage. And that's why we talk about dying to ourselves, because sometimes it's not, are you doing the right thing? It's, are you doing it for the right reason? And that's a heartbreaker, because we all have sinned. We've all fallen short of the glory of God. We've all messed this up at some point because we wanted it to be about us. We've all been in competition with other people, trying to prove that we're better than them. There's a time for competition, and it's great to watch sporting events, things of that nature where people are using their capability and the very best of their capability to compete with other people. But once the game is done, then the competition's over. And when the competition is over, you've got to come back to having relationship with people. And so it's heartbreaking to watch those people who think that they're competing all the time. And they never stop competing. They never allow for the possibility that life is not entirely a competition. There's a time for competition, and there's a time to actually have relationship with other people. And so the beauty of what God has done is he's broken into our broken world where we're all worshiping whatever it is: competition, money, sex, drugs, feelings. People who worship feelings, logic, people who are just science, whatever it is. All of these are good things, but when we worship them, feminism, masculinity, whatever it is, when we start worshiping them, we go way too far out of what's actually going to allow for life and relationship to happen. It's just so good that the entirety of life is letting go so that we can receive. Letting go of being right, letting go of competing, letting go of having to have money, letting go of having to have kids, letting go of having to have a house, letting go of, and what's really wild to me, like I said, we spent the past 3 days just wondering how we were going to get our house fixed. And as soon as we let go, as soon as we stop trying to fix it ourselves, as soon as we stop trying to figure it out, as soon as we stopped trying to prove that we were going to be the ones who could fix it, that's when God provided, and we actually got what we needed. And we put in some new batteries, and now our house is working.
So how did the idea come to get the new batteries?
I don't even remember. Why don't you tell the story?
It just came.
I think we were still hustling around trying to do stuff. We were going to move our trailer. We were going to go, you have to dump from the trailer. You have to empty out the tank. So we were going to try to do that. We were trying to do all these things.
And nothing was working. Nothing. We tried to hook up the trailer and our slide would come in.
Something that we do all the time.
We hooked up the generator. The generator was out of gas. We went down to get gas. The gas station was being repaired. Couldn't get gas. And it was at that point that we just gave up.
Yep.
We were just like, forget it. Let's go ahead and take the dog to the park and let's go take a nap.
Thank you for telling this story the right way. I said we let go. That doesn't mean we just were very gentle and capable and finally said, you know what, I'm going to let go. No, it was kind of like, this has gotten so heavy that I'm still trying. My fingers are desperately trying to hold on, and it's just kind of fallen out of my grasp. I can't carry it anymore. Mm-hmm. So, and sometimes that's what God has to do because we're so stubborn.
Mm-hmm.
Just trying to hold on and cling to being right, to I'm going to fix it. And when we did finally let go, which happened because we didn't have the strength to hold on anymore, that's when God showed up and God gave us the idea. We didn't magically go, oh yeah, it must be the battery. I figured it out. It wasn't us figuring it out.
No, it's not. It's, you've got nothing. You're getting nowhere. And then you let go, and then suddenly just the idea pops into your head. Where do you think that comes from? It didn't come from you. Otherwise, when you were working so hard at it, it would have come. It's not from you.
That's the beauty of life, and all of these verses about grace. When we let go, when we stop trying to fix it, when we stop trying to prove we're right, that's when God will provide, and we actually can fix it. And it's so much easier when God provides. It's so much easier. I've spent so much time banging my head against the wall, trying to fix things, trying to make things the way I want them to be, and it just doesn't work. And it's such a waste of time, money, emotion, mental power, physical strength. You're just exhausting myself. And then when I let go, God makes it all work out for good. Not when I want either. Not when I want. There's times when I'm ready and God's like, nope, not yet. That's not what we're doing right now. If you had been paying attention, you'd actually be ready for something else and involved in something else, and I'd be bringing you back to this on my time. But now you think you're ready. You think you've got everything you need, and it's still not going to work because it's not God's time. And His timing is always right.
And I don't get to predict when that time is going to be.
That's correct.
I don't get to say, I need this to happen right now. I can say it, but
Yep.
Time is of no concern to God.
Man makes a plan and God laughs. It's one of those things that is not from the Bible, but it seems pretty valid because one of the verses that is in Romans, in the Message version, is the unforced rhythms of grace. Get into the unforced rhythm of grace. Not I'm trying to force things to happen, not I'm requiring things to happen. I'm in the unforced rhythm of grace. God's timing, God's way of doing things, when God is ready. And I'm not trying to make it happen. Yeah, go ahead, babe.
I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
What is the difference between polite tolerance and grace?
Ooh, interesting. Why is that in your head?
It's just been on my mind lately. It's just been...
One of the hardest parts about grace is recognizing that it is part of Jesus' parable of the Prodigal Son. Polite tolerance would look like the father telling his son, the son in the Prodigal Son story, the son comes up and basically says, you're dead to me. I wish you were dead. I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. Give me my money. Give me my inheritance, which would be what would come from a will when the father died. Give me my inheritance now. I'm going to go do whatever I want. Polite tolerance would have been, oh, that's cute. You don't get to do what you want. I don't respect your wishes. I don't respect you. I'm going to manipulate you into doing what I want while tolerating you wishing that I was dead. So we see it in, soap operas and drama stories and dramatic movies and things like that.
So
it's like an Oedipal mother or it's the tyrannical father.
So is it like saying one thing while you're scheming behind the scenes?
That's part of it, but what the problem is, because we've called it politeness or tolerance, we pretend that it's a good thing. We pretend that it looks like a good thing. But anyone who's seen an Oedipal mother with her child knows it's just terrible for both. It's a woman who's lonely, who's trying to get her need for connection and relationship through terrorizing her child and manipulating her child into staying in the home, into taking care of her. Oh, I need you to take care of me. No, that's not my job. That's not what I'm here for. Your husband should be doing that, and if your husband isn't available, then your community, your church, all of these other people that's their responsibility. And so they keep their child a child and won't let them grow up, won't give them the responsibility to go out and deal with the consequences of their own situation. So in the prodigal son story, as Jesus tells it, the father actually respects his child's decision. That we call it a child, but this is most likely what we would think of as about an 18-year-old. So it's someone who's saying, I'm going to college now, I hate you, Dad, I don't want to have anything to do with you, I'm going to go live my own life. And in America, there's almost a part of that we celebrate. The part that we celebrate is, I'm going to learn how to become an adult. We don't celebrate the part that says, I'm not going to have anything to do with my parents, I'm not going to respect authority. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some parts of America and some parts of human nature that honor that kind of rebellion. But polite tolerance is letting someone stay the way they are, but then forcing them to stay where you are. The prodigal son gets to go out and deal with the consequences of living the way that he wants to. So what we see in grace is a respect for free will and human decision. The prodigal son leaves. The prodigal son decides to leave and not be in relationship with his father. We also see what would most people think of as grace is when the prodigal son has partied and lost all his money and lived this crazy life and actually gone and become a slave to someone working in a pig pit, which at the time, if you think of kosher Jews, dealing with pigs is like the most disgusting, disturbing, terrible thing that could possibly happen. And so that's where this kid has been. He is unforgivable at this point in time. And what we see is he comes back to his father, and his father shows what grace really is. Clean him up, get him a new robe, get him new shoes, take care of everything that he needs. My son was dead, and now he's alive. And so one of the symbolism aspects of this story is, when you're not in relationship with someone, you're dead. That's why we use the phrase, you're dead to me. It means you don't get to have relationship with me anymore. You're still physically alive, but as far as I'm concerned, you're dead. And so with the prodigal son story, we have a son who was basically dead, he decided to be dead to his father. He decided he was not going to be in relationship with his dad. And he went out, and then when he came back, you get the actual grace because he had humbled himself. He now gets to be back in relationship with his father. And of course, the rest of the story that we often forget is the story of the religious son, the older son, is what we think of, who is upset. Why are you throwing a party for our younger son who's been out there doing all this terrible stuff, who doesn't have any discipline, who doesn't do what you say? That's polite tolerance. That's religious polite tolerance. I'm going to tolerate these people, but when they do something that I don't like, I'm going to fuss and complain. And what's really interesting is, in the story, the older brother doesn't come to the dad to complain. The dad has to go to the older brother. And when the dad asks him, why aren't you in being part of this party? Why aren't you celebrating that your son, your brother has come back home? Here's polite tolerance. I was okay with my brother being here when he was helping out with the family and doing all the things that I think he should have been doing. But as soon as he left, he was gone. Now, what's going to happen to my inheritance? You gave half of it to him. What about me? What about my inheritance? I've been doing the right thing. Why don't you ever throw a party for me? Why don't you ever let me be celebrated? And what's fascinating is the father's response is, if you had asked me for a party, you would have had a party. You never ask. You don't have what you want because you won't ask for it because it's all about you. That's what polite tolerance is. And it's totally based in pride. Go ahead.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Could polite tolerance also be, like, let's say you have a falling out with somebody,
Mm-hmm.
and instead of actually mending the relationship, you know, I'm sorry, what I did was wrong, that kind of thing, and asking for forgiveness, you just wait a period of time.
Yeah.
And then you just come back and pretend like everything's okay.
Right. So what's interesting about, and we're going to go back to the prodigal son story, is the son comes back and says, I'm going to live under your roof. Well, what we don't think about, but is there, if you come back to this person's house and you're going to live under their roof, it means you're going to live under their rules.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be in relationship with them based on the boundaries that they set and the way that they do life and what they expect, and you have to live up to that. What's interesting is in the prodigal son story, he comes back and he says to his father, I don't deserve to be your son, but can I just be a servant or a slave who works for you? Because even then I'll be treated better than I was being treated out here, having to work with the pigs and, you know, eat the pig slop. And so, having been humbled, he's now willing to live within the boundaries of relationship. But yeah, polite tolerance, definitely. The older brother thinks that he is, you know, doing the right things and has this discipline and is living within his father's boundaries, but his heart's all wrong. He's not willing to confront his father when he is upset about a decision that's being made, to have the confrontation, to try to understand, not to say what you're doing is wrong, but to say, I don't understand this. You need to help me understand why you're doing it this way, because I would want to do it this other way, right? And so that's another part of polite tolerance. There's no valid confrontation. There's no debate. There's no interaction or discourse that allows for the older brother to learn anything. And that's why when you look at the older brother, you think they're religious, you think they're arrogant, you think they're prideful, and you don't think that, you recognize those things in that person. And that is polite tolerance. Their heart isn't there. Their heart isn't in the relationship. They're just following the rules so they can get what they want in the end. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so
they behave one way, but their heart's not in it.
Right. And
they aren't giving grace. They don't have forgiveness there.
Right. And so that's what if the story continued, and what we do with our imagination is take that parable, dissect all of it, and then see, well, what would happen if the story continues? Most likely, because we know how human beings interact, the older brother is going to have polite tolerance for his younger brother now, because dad's let him back in. But you're probably going to see, you know, passive aggressive things happening from the older brother. There's still just this arrogance of, I'm better than you. You know, I'm better than you because I did the right thing. I followed the rules. I fill in the blank, whatever it is. We've got a little noise in the background. Give us just a moment. We're going to see if we can let it pass. And because the older brother has that arrogance, that self-righteousness, that religious righteousness, and by religion we just mean following the rules, doing the same thing over and over to get a specific result. Because we recognize that in him, what we know would happen through the rest of the story is he's going to try to lord over his younger brother by saying, I'm better than you because I follow the rules. And most likely the younger brother's not going to care. The younger brother's been humbled, and he's going to say, great, you're right. You're absolutely right. I'm going to go back to doing what I need to do. And there's And it could play out millions of different ways, of course, because that bitterness can still come back and all of that. But that's another thing. Polite tolerance breeds bitterness. Because everyone involved knows that there's manipulation happening, that there aren't good boundaries, that this isn't an actual relationship. This is just follow the rules for the sake of following the rules. And it's heartbreaking for everybody. And there's no connection. It's definitely, you feel alone, and you feel manipulated. And who wants to live like that? Does that all make sense?
Yeah.
Is that answering your question?
Yes.
Is it clear? Is there any part that needs to be clarified more?
No.
Okay. Cool. Well, let's do one more verse, and then that will be our time. So it's this one right here.
Okay.
What is the address?
Let me bring it closer
Once
so
again,
I can see.
Once again, we're in the Message version of the Bible.
1 Corinthians 15:10 is the address.
All right.
But because God was so gracious, so very generous, here I am. And I'm not about to let his grace go to waste. Haven't I worked hard trying to do more than any of the others? Even then, my work didn't amount to all that much. It was God giving me the work to do. God giving me the energy to do it. So whether you heard it from me or from those others, it's all the same. We spoke God's truth, and you entrusted your lives.
So this is Paul, once again, writing a letter to the people in Corinth, a church in Corinth, trying to help them understand how to live correctly, how to follow Jesus, what it means to follow Jesus, all of that good stuff. And if I remember correctly, and I could be wrong, so feel free to let me know if I'm missing it. This is a portion of the Bible where most likely the church was having some inner conflict, saying there are people who aren't part of our church, but they're out there preaching about Jesus and telling people to follow him, but they won't come and be part of our church. And so Paul is reminding them, look, I came and I did all this work to help you understand who God is, but as long as Jesus is the one being preached, then it doesn't matter who's saying it. And God's going to do the judging and sort it out in the end. You're missing what your job is. Your job is to love people. Your job is to interact with people in a loving way so they'll be brought into right relationship with the essence of being, right relationship with who God really is. So, once again, this is about the juxtaposition of pride and grace. When we're proud, we can't receive grace. And so these people, they're proud of a good thing, their church, but they're missing out on, it's not just about your church getting bigger, your church having the most people or the most money or whatever it is. It's not about that. It's about the kingdom of God. It's about people first and foremost, and it's about those people getting into right relationship with God. And if that happens because they come to your church and get to be part of your community, or it happens because someone else is preaching to them and they come into the faith and they never decide to come be part of your particular church, that's okay. Because what's most important is not your church. What's most important is people getting into right relationship with God. And I love this. I love this because I loved watching your eyes as you were reading this verse, my love. And it feels the same way to me. We're talking so much about giving up pride. And yet, when we read this verse, Paul says, haven't I worked hard trying to do more than any of the others? Ooh, that sounds like pride. Are you being prideful, Paul? But then you got to wait for the next verse. You got to wait for the context. Even then, my work didn't amount to all that much. It was God giving me the work to do. God giving me the energy to do it. When we're in right relationship with God, we recognize that God is the one who gives us everything. He gives us life. He gives us breath. He gives us energy. He gives us knowledge. He gives us understanding. He gives us wisdom. And those are three different things. Just because you know stuff, because you read it on Google, doesn't mean you actually understood it or the implications that it has. And it certainly doesn't mean you have the wisdom to know when to use it and when not to, how to use it and how not to. God gives us all of those things. And anytime we start thinking it's us, ooh, we're in trouble.
Do you have
Yes.
any personal stories that fit that?
Oh, a million. It's all of life. It's anytime I think I know something, and so I get so happy that I know something, and then I go try to tell people about it, and they don't care, and so I'm hurt, or they care but they think I'm an idiot because I don't understand it, or they don't like it, and they, don't want to be in relationship with me because I've hurt them because I thought that this information I had was more important than caring about, what's going on in their lives and how it affects them. I mean, that's all of life. It's all of life. Oh. And so it's always, for me, it's the emotion of, oh, I know this piece of information. It's so valuable. It's so important. I'm so interested in it. But like I started this podcast with, I ask people about on Instagram about these different plants because I'm not interested in the plants. Well, just like I'm not as interested in those plants per se, I'm not going to have the knowledge of what each one is called. I'm interested in that moment to have someone who knows tell me. There are people who are not interested in the Bible. They're not interested in hearing about God. They're not interested in or willing to know this piece of information. They don't want any of that because they're doing life their way. And so that's okay. Once again, for me to follow God is to understand that I'm supposed to be like the father in the story of the prodigal son. I've got to respect people's decisions even when I don't like them. Ooh, and that's tough. It's so painful. But if their decision is they're not interested in this information, then for me to love them is to say, okay, I'm willing to let, especially when it's a piece of information that I think, man, if you just knew this, if you just understood this, if you just had some wisdom around this, it would save you from so much pain. Oh, that's the worst one. But I still have to respect them enough to say, I'm not going to force them. I've got to be in the unforced rhythm of grace, not forcing people to know information that they don't want to know, not requiring them to live the way I think they should, because I don't know what God's doing. I do know that God is using the least amount of pain to help this person change, but I don't know why he's letting them go through that much pain, because to me it seems so horrific and terrible. Well, that's the least amount of pain they need to be willing to change. Oh, but I don't want them to go through that pain. And if they just knew this piece of information that I have, that I'm so grateful that God has given to me because I'm finally in a position to receive it, but that doesn't mean anyone else is. Oh yeah, it's all of life. You asked a great question, but it's all of life. It's the entirety of life. I'm so happy, and here's the heartbreaking part of that story. I'm so happy to get that piece of information that I run out to tell other people, and what did I forget to do? I forgot to worship God. I forgot to say, thank you, God, that you finally brought me to this place where this information will help me. Thank you, God, that you finally brought me to the place where my stubbornness isn't getting in the way of me learning this lesson. Because it's taken my entire life for you to get me to this place where I can finally learn this lesson. But now I want to just run out and use it like a battle axe to chop people down and get them to know, hey, you just need to know this and it'll change your whole life. No, it's changed my whole life because God has brought me through all of these other things, step by step by step by step, to get me to the place where I can finally actually hear this information. Oh, but it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. But yes, it's all of life. Thank you for asking that question. What is the Holy Spirit speaking to you as you read this verse?
I could You said Paul was writing
Yes.
this? So I could totally identify with Paul. Haven't I worked hard trying to do more than any of the others? This was my motto at work for many years.
Ooh.
If I outworked everybody,
Mm.
I deserve to move up the ranks.
Mm-hmm.
And when people would move ahead of me that hadn't put in the same amount of work as me, I would be bitter.
Mm.
I would act nice to them, but at home I was hurt and I was angry and I was bitter.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't move up the ranks until I stopped doing that.
Ooh. So here's some business help for everybody.
I stopped doing that. I started putting boundaries in place. No, I cannot work on that day. No, I will not come in early. No, I'm not available then.
Mm.
This is when I'm available. If this works for you, we can do it. If not, here's somebody else. Now, I had learned at that point, at a certain point, I had learned that, no, I will not do that because I have this event with my children. I am giving this time for my children.
Mm.
That's
a good boundary.
That one I learned.
Mm-hmm.
But I still hadn't learned it for myself.
Ooh, come on. Speak about that. Yes, that's good. It's painful.
It
That's
is.
good.
And I had heard this message over and over, and it just, I could not put it into play for myself for a long time. And that was that nobody will take care of you like you. Meaning, I have to set the boundaries of God comes first. I have to set the order of importance in my life.
Yes.
I have to put those boundaries in place. And one of the great gifts that I learned and was able to share with other people, let's just go a business realm, is set your schedule first. Don't deviate. Build the business within that schedule. Don't be chasing dollars so much that you give up the things that are most important to you. Your relationship with God, your relationship with your children, your relationship with your spouse. Anyway, yeah, so, and the thing that I had to remember was that God was giving me that energy to do it in the first place. It wasn't me.
And we come back to free will with that. God gives us all this energy, and then we get to decide how we're going to use it. And so often, we misuse it. We don't schedule it. We don't have a budget for our money. We don't budget our time, which is what a schedule is. We don't decide beforehand how we're going to live our life, and then we're just doing whatever feels good emotionally, and then we find ourselves getting the consequences of doing whatever felt good emotionally, and that's a painful place to be in.
And then we want to go to God to fix it.
Yes.
We want Him to fix our consequences.
Yes. And yet He's using the minimum amount of pain, the natural consequences, to teach us the lessons we need to learn. And I love it because it brings me back to, we have a granddaughter now, so we're watching this happen in real time, but, do you spank your child? Well, I would rather a 4-year-old or a 2-year-old or whatever get a spanking, which is a very minimal and unpleasant but not as painful as punishment, than have them put their hand into a fire and burn their hand. We so often think spanking is bad. No, spanking is a valid thing. It can be used inappropriately. When you're just angry and you beat a child, that's a problem and it's wrong. But when you say, don't put your hand in the fire, and the kid goes to put their hand in the fire anyway, and instead of burning their hand and having to go to the hospital and all of the things that go along with that, you give them a pat on the butt, or 2 or 3, depending on the child and how stubborn they are and how much pain they need to learn the lesson. That's a valuable thing that is helpful for everybody. It's much better that the community doesn't have to deal with having that child be in the emergency room where other people have been in accidents and need help, but now this child is getting time with the doctor. Valid that the child, yeah, they need it, but you could have saved all of that. You could have saved the time that you as a parent are spending taking them to the hospital and doing all these other things. All of these things could have been saved with just a whack on the butt or 3 whacks on the butt or whatever it is. You're telling me that it makes more sense and it's more worthwhile to let the kid burn their hand? I mean, it's heartbreaking that we have forgotten the value and the reasoning and the reasonable use of this lesson, teaching.
It's like people put that together with reacting in anger to your child.
Right.
And that's a very different thing than a chosen discipline for the child. That's a very different thing.
And that's why we can't have a debate about it, because we're not talking about spanking. We're using the word spanking. That's what we use as we have the debate. But what we're actually talking about is exactly what you just said, reacting in anger to the child. And so we talk about spanking, and then we don't talk about, well, what about yelling at your kid?
Mm-hmm.
And you're yelling at them in anger because they're not doing what you said, but you could have just said it very succinctly, quietly, hey, don't do that, or you're going to get a spanking.
Mm-hmm.
And if you use the spanking correctly, then you don't have to yell. But the debate is about reacting in anger, and you can do as much or more damage when you yell at your child, when you tell them when you call them names, when you tell them they're a bully, when you tell them they're not smart, when you tell them they're a manipulator.
I'm disappointed in you.
Ooh, I'm disappointed. That's, oh yeah, heartbreaking. Because it's no longer about what the child was doing. It's about who the child is, and that will destroy a kid. That'll destroy any human being. And even as adults, we still react to someone saying, I'm disappointed in you, mostly with, well, I don't care about you anymore. Because that statement destroys relationship. It destroys relationship. So yes, the debate is about reacting in anger. And that's one more reason to come back to who God is and the essence of being and how God shows us to interact with the world. God is slow to anger. It takes a long time, not for him to be angry. Oh, he's angry. He is angry that we're sinning and worshiping these things that are not him, because the consequences are destruction. He's angry, but he's not going to react in anger. And that's one of the great things about God, and that's one of the lessons we learn as we learn about who God is. Oh, so many heartbreaking things. And we're not perfect. We're human beings. We've all reacted in anger to people who we love, to people who we don't know, to people who we care about, to people who we don't care about, or claim we don't care about. We really do care about them. Oh, yes. Good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. Is there anything else from this verse that particularly stands out for you?
No, that one's just...
It's just painful and it's hurting you, kicking you right in the teeth. I love this part of the verse. So whether you heard it from me or from those others, it's all the same. We spoke God's truth and you entrusted your lives. That's that moment of humility. Like, once again, Paul seems like he's going to be arrogant. I did all this work. No. We have to remember that it's about relationship with God. And it's not about, once again, competing. Oh, I'm the one who made sure that all these people said the prayer of salvation, or I got all these people baptized, or God gave you the strength to do all of that. It's not about you. It's not about me. It's not about any one of us individually. It's about relationship with God and doing that the best we can and helping each other along to have right relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so grateful to have you all here. Hope this has been interesting and helpful and wonderful for you. Let us know. We want to hear your feedback and what this means for you, how you're doing as you read the Bible. What are you getting out of it? what is your relationship with God like? What's going on in your relationship with God? Let us know. We're here to be part of walking with you towards right relationship with God.
Follow and subscribe on Twitch to chat with us.
Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts from.
Thank you for joining us on this adventure.
Much love, Tully Adventures. Explore.